reading from Luke chapter 24, verses 13 to 19 and 28 to 35. On that same day, 2 disciples were traveling to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking to each other about everything that had happened. While they were discussing these things, Jesus himself arrived and joined them on their journey. They were prevented from recognizing him. He said to them, "What are you talking about as you walk along?" They stopped, their faces downcast. The one named Cleopas replied, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who is unaware of the things that have taken place there over the last few days?" He said to them, "What things?" They said to him, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth." When they came to Emmaus, he acted as if he was going on ahead. But they urged him, saying, "Stay with us. It's nearly evening, and the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. After he took his seat at the table with them, he took the bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, but he disappeared from their sight. They said to each other, "Weren't our hearts on fire when he spoke to us along the road and when he explained the scriptures for us?" They got up right then and returned to Jerusalem. They found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying to each other, "The Lord really has risen. He appeared to Simon." Then the 2 disciples described what had happened along the road and how Jesus was made known to them as he broke the bread. May the living word of God speak to us through these ancient words of Scripture.
There's a story told by Barbara Brown Taylor in her book, Learning to Walk in the Dark, that I'd like to read to you. I thought about summarizing it for you, but she has such a way with words, and they are absolutely beautiful. You'll see why, but I invite you, if you so desire, to close your eyes as I tell this story and picture yourself right alongside her as she goes through. Dialogue in the Dark was a kind of reality show in which sighted people are given red-tipped white canes before entering a completely dark exhibition hall where they're introduced to their blind guides. I purchased my tickets on a website with the headline, "Where the Blind Really Do Lead the Blind," recruiting 2 friends to go with me so I would have someone to compare notes with afterward. When we arrived on the appointed night, the sighted person at reception directed us to a bank of lockers against one wall and told us to leave our valuables there. Also, your watch, your cell phone, and anything else that gives off light, she said. Might as well leave your glasses, too, since you won't be needing them. This felt so much like getting ready for a medical procedure that my heart went wobbly inside my chest. After I had put everything but my clothes in the locker, I joined my friends at the door of the exhibit, where we made lame jokes along with everyone else in our small group. The receptionist pointed to an umbrella stand near the door that was full of white canes. "Choose one that's the right height," she said. The jokes stopped after that. Most of us had seen people making their way down sidewalks with such sticks. We were about to become them. Soon after, the door opened, and a recorded voice instructed us to enter and sit down on one of the wooden cubes we would find inside. The small anteroom was softly lit, so the seats were still visible. "Starting now," the voice said while the light dimmed, "notice how much you rely on sight in the course of an ordinary day. Notice how much this costs you in terms of your other senses, which you are about to use as you may never have used them before. Do what your guide tells you. If you need help, do not be afraid to ask for it. Enjoy your dialogue in the dark." At least I think that's what the voice said. By that time, I was so busy noticing how dark it was that I was not listening very well. Was that a man or a woman who'd been sitting across from me? I could hear both voices in the room, but not where they were coming from. A slight breeze stirred as a new voice spoke in the dark. "Hello," a woman said. "My name is Dolores, and I am legally blind, but tonight I am your best bet of getting from one end of this exhibit to the other. So why don't you just stand up and follow me into the first gallery? Just follow the sound of my voice, and don't forget your canes." For the next hour, I did my best to follow Dolores' voice, though this did not prevent me from running into walls, missing doorways, and stepping on other people's heels, and tripping over my own cane. The first space we walked into was full of bird sounds. "Enjoy the park," Dolores said. "There's a bridge over a stream and a nice grassy spot on the other side. But don't dawdle, we have a lot to do." I found the handrail of the bridge without too much trouble and listened to the water flowing underneath me. Then I missed the step down at the end and landed hard against the back of the person in front of me. He was definitely a he, taller than I, and his shirt smelled clean, though for once I had nothing more to go on. I did not know if he was old or young, white or black, pleasant to look at or not. There was no body language for me to read, no visual data to help me form judgments about who he was or what he was like. This was unexpectedly refreshing, like being at a party when the lights go out. The normal rules of polite social interaction were suspended. Furthermore, he could not see me any better than I could see him, which meant that I was excused from his judgments of me as well. The next room was a grocery store. Go ahead and feel what is on those shelves and in those coolers, Dolores said. There's produce in the bins behind you, too. When I found things about which there was no doubt, like a bunch of grapes or a head of cabbage, my fingers lit up. See, they said to my eyes, we can do this without your help. Canned goods were another thing altogether. Without sight, the difference between 16 ounces of peas and 16 ounces of Chef Boyardee was completely beyond me. The store was small, but I still got turned around in it, so Dolores' voice came from behind me when it was time to go. This way to the street, she said. Which way, I asked. Walk toward my voice, she said. When I did, I found the double glass doors of the store and pushed through them to land on a sidewalk outside. Confronted with the sound of traffic for the first time, I forgot everything I ever knew about respecting other people's personal space. So did everyone else. We huddled together, unsure whether the horns were honking at us because we were standing in the street or because our light had turned green and we could not see it. When you hear the pedestrian signal beep, that means it is safe to cross the street, Dolores said. But the information was hard to trust. The signals meant that cars were supposed to stop, not that they would stop. It did not know who was driving while texting, eating a leaky hamburger, or edging forward to make a right turn on red without checking the crosswalk first. Was anyone really looking out for me when I could not look out for myself? As I stood rooted to the sidewalk, the voices of the others grew fainter and fainter. No one called out or came back to get me. As often as I heard the biblical story about the one stray sheep in the wilderness, I'd always assumed that the sheep was to blame for wandering away from the flock in search of better clover. But I had not moved. My shepherd had told me to walk toward her voice, but fear had prevented me. Now all of a sudden I was more afraid of being left behind than of being run over. I stepped into the street. A horn blared. I waved my cane wildly in the air. When it made no contact, I remembered that the cars were not real. But that did not stop me from shaking like a cat in a thunderstorm. When I stumbled over the curb, I bumped into another member of the group who was as surprised by me as I was by her. I don't know where they went, she said, so I thought I'd just stand here until someone came back for me. Made brave by one another's company, we felt our way along the walls until we entered a new room full of voices. The boat will be here any minute, Dolores said. Just watch your step when you walk down the ramp. I had lost my friends. I was tired of feeling incompetent. When my turn came, I dropped into the boat, ready for my dialogue with the dark to be over. But I was also aware of how blindness had split the distance between me and all these other people. Touching was inevitable. Apologies were redundant. We were not embarrassed to be dependent on each other. Since none of us could be sure who was black or white, young or old, our exchanges were free of any ideas we had about those identity markers. Maybe someone should start an opaque church where we could learn to give up one kind of vision in hope of another. Instead of wearing name tags, we would touch each other's faces. Instead of looking around to see who's there, we could learn to listen for each other's voices. In the last room, Dolores invited us to take a seat at the bar and order a drink from the bartender if we wanted one. Since soft drinks were the only kind of offer, I passed, half listening as Dolores thanked us for visiting the exhibit. Then someone pushed open a door, and we all walked blinking into the light of the lobby. It was like seeing people you had slept next to in a gym during a power outage. People who knew that you snored or talked in your sleep without knowing anything else about you. Appearances restored. We all stole looks at one another, and we parked our canes and retrieved our belongings from our lockers, offering quick little waves goodbye without meeting each other's eyes. As I was strapping my watch back on my wrist, I looked up to see an African-American woman with milky eyes come through the same door that I had just exited, sweeping her cane in front of her. "Good night, Dolores," the receptionist said. "See you tomorrow," Dolores said, as I watched my blind guide walk into the night. I still do not know what darkness means to someone who is blind, but I am beginning to understand that light has as many meanings as dark. I really resonated with this story. It acknowledges all of the places that we have been so far, and her writing and her descriptions make it feel so real, like we could really be there with her in the dark. And we started a couple of weeks ago by discovering that that dark can actually be a place for discovery, for learning, not just a place of fear, and that is well described by Barbara Brown Taylor in this excerpt. She goes from being overly confident to the goo that is being reshaped inside of a cocoon, inside the dialogue in the dark, as she realized she needs to be transformed in her thinking to essentially survive. Then, like the door being opened and the light of the lobby pouring in upon her group, there comes a time when we must emerge from the darkness, pushing off our cocoons, which are irreparably torn open. What strikes me the most, however, is after this long and beautifully detailed story, one where we almost feel like we are right there with her, where the description of her experience is so poignant that we too are bumping into her in the dark, comes this moment of seeing the companions with whom she shared this experience. The light changed how she saw them, how she saw herself. I bet that when she left that lobby and walked onto the street, that she thought twice about whether that car was going to stop. Imagine what it was like to look around at the very same faces that you gathered with in the pre-exhibit room before even knowing the name of your guide. Those faces look different now. She had been transformed in the dark. And now, as she stepped back into the light, as the light rushed over her, almost overwhelming her, she knew that things were different. I imagine this is something like what happened on that road to Emmaus 2,000 years ago. These disciples were walking in their darkness. Their teacher, their rabbi, their friend is gone. They don't yet know that he's risen. They're still in the darkness of Good Friday. So when Jesus appears to them, this new light, they simply don't have the eyes to see that it's him. He talks with them, he inspires them, he teaches them, so much so that they invite him to stay the night. This would have been a common custom at the time, so they were showing a socially acceptable level of hospitality. But then comes the amazing part. The cocoon rips open as he tears the bread and as he offers the cup. For it was in that moment of enlightenment that washed over them, and they realized that they were changed. The dark of the past 3 days had changed them. And you know what? They were never going back. You see, they couldn't. They couldn't go back, because that is what happens when the cocoon splits open. That part of our life is over. We're moving on. We are forced to contend with the blinding light that now consumes our experience. But what this light does is actually illuminate that things have changed. No, not that things have changed, that we have changed. It is this holy light that allows us to claim who we are as we emerge from the cocoons, unable to go back, now basking in the light of claiming our new identity, transformed, changed, ready. And what a gift. What a gift that this revelation to the disciples happens at the very same table that we are about to gather around. For it was in the words of institution, the words of communion, that the light poured out upon them and they realized who they were. They weren't just followers of a wise man, a teacher who inspired, a healer who performs signs. They were disciples of the Christ, the Messiah, the one who saved the world and opened their eyes to a new, fresh understanding of God. So today, as you come to this table, perhaps you can embrace the same. The journey that you've been on from turning to goo inside a cocoon to taking the leap of it, breaking it open. It now invites you to stand in that light and discover the ways that you have been changed, that you have been transformed, and to claim who you are now. Claim your identity, the one that God is calling you into, the one that God has transformed you into. And this transformation means that we see the world differently. Not necessarily that the world has changed. The traffic is still the same. But the way that we approach the traffic, that might be different. Because in the light of day, as our cocoons are left behind, we can claim that which we are starting to know in the depths of our souls. I am different. I am being transformed. And God has called me here to this moment. And so now we ask, what's next? What's next as I take that bold, courageous step into the light? What is this new identity that I claim?